some energy in the during this panel discussion. While we have already done a round of introduction, I'd like to give you the flavor of the people present on the stage. We have people who are designers, we have people who have led companies for a while, have done product management, have led sort of those companies into creating great games. We have people who are hard engineering background. We have people who are creating great games that I have played and still remember till date, correct? So we have the whole sort of the spectrum of folks who are there in a game design, development, distribution, correct, experience of that. To start with, how I see, though I'm a tech lawyer, I've been working with this industry for a while. How do I see gaming when it comes to entertainment? I think generally entertainment for most time was one to many. It was unidimensional, correct? Movies, radios, film, television. Then came in gaming, correct? 40, 50-year-old. I'm talking about digital gaming. Then later online immersive gaming. Gaming is what I think is experiential entertainment, correct? It changed the way human mind looked at entertainment. It changed the way we saw how we can spend our time and disposable income to get entertained, not just at home, but also talking or playing with hundreds of other players on the same server, interacting with them. People can say that it was sort of a breakthrough event in terms of entertainment. Then came another breakthrough event in tech generally, that's AI, artificial intelligence, and that's what we are going to talk about. How does artificial intelligence is shaping gaming, how it may shape gaming, certain ethical and responsible AI concerns that will come up. Those are some tough questions that I'll ask these guys. But to begin with, the first question I want to say is that when people talk about AI, I know ChatGPT took us by storm. Generative AI caught the fancy of the world, but we all know generative AI is not the only thing. It is one of the important components of use cases of AI use cases, but there is analytics involved, there is agentic AI, there are different kinds of use cases and sort of domains in which AI is involved. So it's not just Gen AI, correct? So in terms of game design, in terms of art design, in terms of game development, architecture, tech side of it, in terms of monetization, distribution of it, in terms of improvement of it, and in terms of also maintaining integrity and safety of gaming experience and platforms, correct? From that perspective, what I like is if you guys can go one by one and explain from your vantage point, how do you think that you are using AI, and if you are planning to use AI, how would you like to use AI? Correct? Starting from Kinshuk, if you can give us your 2 cents on this.
So that's a very interesting question, how we're using AI or plan to use AI. But to put that in context, we first need to look at how technology has evolved over the years. And, I don't think many of the audience here were around in early 90s when personal computer became a thing. And there were similar concerns about how it is going to take away lots of jobs, how it's going to, dilute the value of expertise by making things more accessible, more available to everybody. But what we saw is that PCs in general transformed us, helped us evolve and be better at what we could achieve, right? In a similar fashion, we see a shift happening with AI. Of course, very early years, so there's a lot of things that need to be sorted out. But as a young studio that we're building at Second Quest, we see AI as a great enabler. We see it as something that can help us approach a problem from multiple perspectives and then leverage our skills, our craft, our experiences, and the power of the community that we build around ourselves to solve those challenges. A very simple example of this would be, how do we even look at a product? Like, how do we decide how we are going to build a game and what game that should be, right? How do we figure out a market for it? How do we then figure out the core of that product and build it? So these are some questions that we're trying to address with AI at Second Quest, and I think it's doing a phenomenal job in just helping us look at it from multiple vantage points. Going forward, we think a lot of tech enablement will also assist us, but that's something we'll talk over the duration of this conversation.
All right. First of all, thank you so much for having me over here. It's always great to be part of such an eminent panel. Before I go into the answer, I would just introduce myself to you just because you'll have, some sort of a credibility to what I'm saying. So I am the principal game designer of Gameloft. I'm also the founder of Level 1 Labs, which is basically a game design consultant studio. I work in improving your engagement, retention, and monetization and stuff like those. My games have won User's Choice Game of the Year award for 2020. I mean, XYZ. So coming to the question, so being a game designer, I would probably categorize my way of interacting with AI into two different tiers probably. Let's take all those top studios, AAA studios, where they have successful titles, they have a lot of R&D team, they have in-house proprietary tools that they could actually use to even do stuff that the general public are not even aware of, right? So top studios, they use crazy analytical AIs where you can actually literally look at data. I mean, it used to be we humans, we used to look at every single rate of changes, if the revenue has gone down, if the retention has gone down manually, and then we used to figure out a reason why this might have happened, right? And then we ourselves would probably come with some solution that we think would be right to a system where there are a lot of analytical tools that are available within the studio where you can just pump in data. The AI itself will visualize it for us. It will tell you the problems. We just have to ask. The moment we ask, it even gives you solutions based on various different parameters, right? It makes our life much, much more easier when it comes to data analytics, right? So this is something like top AAA level studios are doing these days. I mean, not just that. I mean, we'll be talking about NPC interactions, which a lot of you guys will be knowing about it. There'll be a lot of procedural level generation stuff we'll be talking about. We're doing all those stuffs over there in the top level. Now, when it comes to the game design on a probably, common publicly available tool section, we use LLMs, right? We would probably do that for brainstorming, creation of emails and stuff like those, but there's a whole different world on the other side, right? But yeah, so from a game design standpoint, let's look at each of these roles and let's see what AI do we really use, or what are the use cases of AIs for all these different roles of game design. If it's a narrative designer, we would probably use, I cannot reveal all the names of these though, but we could probably use this to come up with a lot of different story arcs. We could create player backstories. We could just tell these AI tools, hey, I just need a conversation between these two characters, length, XYZ, number of characters, XYZ, and then at the end of the character, or end of the conversation, I want it to end with something, playful, funny, it would just give you instantly, and it makes our life so easy, which again, corresponds to the ethicalness and everything else in the future. But that's something that we do in narrative. When it comes to level designs, we have, the procedural stuffs, which X-Ray was talking, right? I don't know, I guess we're there for the previous talk, right? Procedural, there are so many stuff that we are actually using. To conclude, AI is revolutionizing the way we are working every single department, and not just game design. So I hope, you'll be able to probably share a bit more on your side of stuffs.
Yeah, thank you. That was quite insightful. Yeah, I'll try to give a generic view on that because we haven't started using that much of AI in terms of generative AI. But there's no second thought that AI is revolutionizing the industry, right? Like, it makes your job so much easier. It is a more intelligent Google. Like, if you're looking at like a developer perspective, there used to be a time when you didn't want people to Google and copy paste code from somewhere, right? But all of that has been normalized now. And most developers, the first thing that they do is go to Google and say, okay, has anyone solved this? And not just development, but talking in general. But yeah, so I think AI, what it does is makes those jobs easier. When you talk about design, when you talk about even art, when you have to just quickly think of ideas, brainstorming, all of those things, I think AI does it very quickly for you. Yes, it does make you a little lazier in a few things, but it also gives an opportunity for people to focus on what's more important, right? All the grunt work, all of these things are things that the AI can take care of. Like, something that can take you days to do, it can do it in seconds or minutes. Like, let that do it, and then we focus on more important things. what you can think of. Like even a narrative thing, like he was explaining, if it gives you this whole chunk of data, then we can go in and manually see like, okay, what all things that make sense for my game, what makes sense for my product. And I think that's what helps in general speed up the process. As all of us know, game making is an extremely hard and difficult process. But if this is going to cut down the time of development, I think that helps studios sustain, and that I think is the way for the future.
Hi. So I'll give you the perspective from a game developer's side of view. So whenever you are building a game, the first thing that you want is the MVP, right? You want to know whether what I'm trying to imagine or what I'm trying to envision, whether users will like it or not. That is one area where it used to take months of development, do different design iterations. Then you go to beta customers, try it out, realize that there are certain feedbacks that you need to incorporate. So the cycle to launch the game becomes quite high. With all these AI tools, be it generative AI as well as be it tools like ChatGPT, code modules, as well as Anthropic is doing quite a good amount of work there. So with just a basic prompt, you can design your game in such a manner where you can give it to either the internal users or the beta user, where the level design can come later, but you can always start with a beta product, right? You can play a few rounds of the game, you can see what kind of user interaction is there, what kind of controls that we want to build, and you can always iterate through again and again. This is where the AI tools has helped us a lot towards the launch cycle. The same game that used to take 6 months, year, 2 years kind of a timeline, now you can always fast track that. The other part of it is also, since for coding part of it, for the development part of it, a lot of knowledge is already out there on which all these tools have been trained on. So whenever you get into a problem, when earlier your approach used to be going to a Google, go to a Stack Overflow, and then go through different pages to realize that okay, maybe you are getting the result, maybe you are not. With these tools, if this is a problem that has been solved earlier, you will find a result. You will find a result either on one tool or another tool based on your preference. But the amount of development time that it saves, the go-to-market time that it takes, is huge. That has created impact in your launch timeline, as well as the quality of product. You can always launch less bugs in the games when you are launching it. You can get instant feedbacks, and those iterations is where all the AI products are helping us a lot.
Thanks, Sunil. I think going round the panel, correct, what I've heard is that on the creative side of things, when it comes to storyline, character interactions, context and dialogues, correct, designing maybe levels, etc., correct, on the creative side of things, it makes your life easier. That's one. It brings down on the tech side, it brings, obviously, what Tarun said, that while coding might become easy, correct, like instead of going to Google, you can use a Copilot to sort of help you in that. But the larger sort of benefit is the iteration time, and the cycles have the time of having those iteration cycles have gone down significantly. So you can make more mistakes quicker and then go to your next phase much quickly, correct? That's more on the tech development side generally. Also on the art side, and I was telling Gautam Jali, I've played one of his games and the art was something that stuck me, correct? So even on the art design side of things, I am assuming the efforts will go down. There might be certain other sort of ethical issues which will come to later on. So that will also go down. On the analytics side, also heard Kinshu, etc. On the analytics side as well, correct? How do you figure out why retention is going down, what GQ talked about, how user behavior is sort of interacting with that game level, etc. Correct? That time as well as the insights will become much, instead of a hit and trial, you can have more sort of succinct and direct insights as to how to improve that. Correct? That's what I'm hearing. Now, what I'll do is, before we go into other questions on specifics, correct? We talked about NPCs, correct? And this is something before the panel started, I brought one game and I hadn't played that game before, but because I saw something from NVIDIA, I can take those names, so I will take those names. So NVIDIA showed me the game called Immersive, correct? It's MMORPG game. There is a boss there, correct, which you have to fight. It's dragon-looking boss, and if you go and fight that boss, that unlike other boss that you would have fought in any other game, you can find out the pattern how that boss will react and win that level after one or two attempts. You can figure out what the pattern is and win it, correct, by defeating that pattern. That boss, based on NVIDIA is backed sort of tech, that boss can learn your playing style and change its reactions accordingly, correct? So that's one bit of how AI is changing in terms of direct characters. Then also we were talking about how NPCs generally in world-based games, how NPCs can become more immersive, more real, might look less awkward, correct? So in terms of gameplay experience controlled by AI instead of hard-coded, tree logic or general algorithm, that experience will change, correct? On that, I would like your views if all of you want to chip in, or if one or two of you want to chip in from that perspective, because I think this audience it will be much easier for the audience to grab that as a use case for AI, correct? So Jiku, you want to maybe start? Yeah.
Sure. I would probably divide this into two. I'll first talk about NPCs and then bosses. I mean, technically bosses are also kind of NPCs, but bigger NPCs probably, because their way of interaction would be much different. I mean, you don't actually go and talk to a boss and hey, how are you, and stuff like those, right? So for the normal NPCs, I mean, there have been a lot of videos that are publicly available that can be, I think Unreal. There are so many stuff that we can actually use to have that scripted behavior of NPCs out of the way, right? So imagine a scenario where you can actually talk to an NPCs, build a relationship with them with its confined scope, okay? You cannot just ask him anything and because we game designers always tell that, this character belongs to this particular place, this particular profession, that's his likes, dislikes, so he will be able to talk within that limitations. Now, when a player talks to that NPC and has some meaningful interaction within that NPC, probably regarding the game or the world, or asking the NPC where to go, getting help and stuff, and next time when you see the same NPC, let's say you did like a complete round of the world and then you saw the same NPC at some other part of the world, and then you're like, hey, do you remember me? And the NPC is like, yes, aren't you Jiku? We spoke in New York City, right? And you'll be like, yes, right? See that level of immersion that we'll be having with that NPC, right? And imagine all of this. This is inside the game, right? I mean, if you're in a metaverse, when there's actually an avatar that you can limitlessly talk to in a VR world, things are just endless. You can actually literally have some, there was the Elon Musk was saying the biggest problem that humankind would face would be a population collapse, right? So I myself have a lot of AI characters, which, I have my AI therapist. Whenever I have my problems, I'll just go into my AI therapist. I talk, it's much more peaceful than talking to my wife, right? So, right? So, yeah, so NPCs and the interaction between its NPCs are going to be huge in the future. And when it comes to boss fights and stuffs, yes, I mean, I think Left 4 Dead did this a long time back when they used to actually understand the player pattern on where the players are actually going, each of these levels. They understood the general pattern of the public and then started spawning NPCs or enemies in certain spots. And then to the next level of it is basically what you were saying, right? NPCs or the bosses learning and getting better at beating you, so that every single player of every single caliber and skill will be able to get a challenge of his own. This is something that we game designer always find it so difficult, because we always try to find out one solution that fits all, which is impossible. And we'll have like our own rules, systems, calculations, and everything, so that we could give some randomness to the player based on his skill. AI is definitely helping us over there as well. Yeah. Concluding my point, yes. There's no stopping in what we can do with AI. There's definitely going to be like huge future that I could probably see over there as well. But yeah, I would probably pass it on to Gautam.
Yeah, I think I'll have a slightly different view in terms of how it can be used. I think when it's sandboxy kind of things like the metaverse kind of experiences, I think 100% like this, exactly what you said, I think makes a lot of sense. But when it comes to NPCs, when a single player experiences, I think some things that we would want as game devs is to understand what our players are going to experience. So some kind of control instead of like I've put an AI that runs in this game, right? I have zero control on it. Like you ask more questions, it learns more, it replies more. I have no control on where that's going to go, right? So when I have my NPCs in my game, which is a single player experience, I want to know what the players are experiencing. I want to design the experience in such a way. So I think in that sense, using AI as a tool, like how I was saying earlier, to get like different trees of dialogues, for example, and then I go and pick and choose and be like, okay, like I think I can make it dynamic enough that it chooses from these lists. I think that would be a better approach for such experiences. But when it's experiences in game where you just have a chatbot and you want to go as a player and talk to it, and in such situations, I think it'll be amazing. Like I don't have to spend all my time and effort to try and do all these dialogue trees, and it's just like plug in an AI and it works, right? So I think that way it works very well. And I think a sort of when it comes to boss fights and NPCs, for example, we're also building a game which has boss fights right now. I think I would have the same kind of concerns of like, how do I control the dynamism of the boss fight?
What if it becomes too difficult and player drops?
Exactly. So I have, again, I fear the lack of control on how the boss is going to react to the player's actions. And yeah, that's my view.
But you know, okay. So I again have a slightly different perspective on it. I think in terms of design, those controls are part of the design, how we build it. But the perspective that I have is that we tend to hype things up a lot. AI is now a revolution, so suddenly we're talking about all these NPC interactions and everything. But if you look at it, for generations of games, designers have been trying to build these interactions, right? If you look at Elder Scrolls, if you look at games like Witcher, right? They come with this huge lore, and each character is deep rooted into that specific piece of history of that world. Now, there was a human limitation to that. There was a production cost to building that lore, and the extent of how in depth you could go was constrained. So there were production choices that people had to make, teams had to make. How much depth and detail do you build in an NPC, given what their role in this entire experience is, right? With the LLMs coming in, the ability to generate huge amounts of lore for huge amounts of NPCs now exists. Technology has solved that cost challenge, right? Which is why now you see this upsurge in people wanting to do this. I've seen these mods of Elder Scrolls where they had this LLM trained on the entire lore of the Elder Scrolls series, and then you had these. So that is now technology enabling something that we've been doing for I don't know how many years now. A similar example is the whole storyteller AI, not the AI we are talking about, but the AI before AI in RimWorld, right? Because AI has been there, right? Earlier it was algorithmic, it was procedural. Now it's LLM. So if you look at a game like RimWorld, and if you look at the whole storyteller component, which completely controls the narrative the player is going to experience while they're building this colony of refugees, space refugees, they were attempting something similar, but again, those resource constraints are there, right? Nobody has infinite time and infinite money to build a game that is infinite. So I think that's how AI is changing that. And a good designer would find ways to create very interesting, enriched experiences through these technical tools.
Yeah, I think so we got the perspective of a single player as well as multiplayer. I'll also add a little bit on the multiplayer front, specifically the games that are quite popular these days on mobile as well as on desktop, games like PUBG, Free Fire, these kind of games. So whenever you're playing these games, you always want to play with a human, right? Because you want the challenge, you want that dopamine effect that comes when you are beating somebody. But the key problem with these games, whenever you are building, whenever you are creating a new game, is how do you get these users? And user is all you want whenever you are building games, right? Retention is the most important aspect for you. If you start with an NPC that a developer has created, he can only think of R, right? The bot can do X, Y, Z amount of work, well, maybe shoot a little, maybe walk a little, use few of the weapons. But you are going there for a challenge. You want to feel that human interaction where you are taking a headshot, you are taking a shot, those kind of things. That's where AI comes in. You can keep training your model by looking at how humans are playing the games, and you can keep spawning these NPCs which can get trained and start making you feel like there is a human playing, right? That interaction makes more challenging now. Consider a game like PUBG or this kind of 50 players spinning up, but there are only 5 humans, and 45 of them are bots. You'll instantly kill them all, and then you don't feel like I got a challenge. But with the AI, you can start training it. You can start training these models again and again, so that the retention that you're keenly focusing on, which basically bring more user again and again using these NPC bots, can keep increasing, and if you start training these via all of these LLM models.
Thank you. I mean, from PUBG example, it's now BGMI India. So one of the earlier ways I learned playing that game was how to recognize how to differentiate between a real player versus a bot coming across. So you go and kill the bot to get the loot and wait and avoid the real players for the first few minutes, correct? So I understand, again, that became a part of how you strategize the game, but I do get to a point that if it was more than, out of 100, if it was more than 10 or 15 bots, I would also start asking, okay, maybe this is not a great time, that there are not enough people on the server, maybe let's not play at that time, correct? So I do get your point in terms of when it's a human to human or a multi-human sort of playground, how bad bots sort of, acting as humans can be interesting concept, how bosses can be recognizing pattern of players and becoming great. Concerns about also, can you limit them, and also solutions that, yes, if you design it, there are ways to limit it. There are filters, etc. There are parameters that you sort of ring fence around that AI bot and their reactions. That's an interesting thing. So we have talked about how Gen AI and analytical insights into gameplay and game data can give you insights, etc. How you can design certain NPCs, etc. One bit, and in the initial point that I made, was that how do you also make games safe, trusted, integrity of the platform is maintained. We were discussing with this panel that some of the biggest releases, correct, AAA games, multiplayer games in Battle Royale or otherwise, had a bad experience because of a lot of cheaters, hackers, correct? There were frauds at times committed, correct? There are other gameplays where there is fraud committed generally, correct? Even simple board games like chess, for example, though we are not talking about it, but just criminal, correct? So there's a huge issue on chess.com or list generally that, you don't know whether you're playing against a person or just there's another bot behind it which is playing against you, correct? From that perspective, Tarun, because you come from that thing, and I know that your company has certain sort of products which work for your platforms also. How do you make sure that there is the integrity and fraud prevention works well, and how AI and ML specifically sort of is helping you do that?
This would be more of the ML part of it as an AI, because when you're talking about fraud, you can't let AI run the show, right? You want the controls to be placed. However, for any game or any kind of it's a general principle that you do not want fraud in your system. For these kind of stuff, you start with a rule-based system, but you eventually realize that people are faster than you are writing the rules, right? The more scale that you get, the more kind of different frauds are there. So with every time you're playing a game, you start collecting that data, what kind of moves people can play, and based on that you start, training your models to understand and recognize the patterns which are not humanly possible. For example, in a game like PUBG and these kind of, Apex games, one of the things that they used to have, right, people used to have these mods or these different devices through which they can, generate those headshots very fast, very quickly. So you keep training your models, on ML to ensure that the fraud is not happening, and you collect this data whenever there is a gameplay happening. You ensure that you collect that data, put it in your system, train your model to recognize the pattern, and that's the iterative cycle that you keep working on. And people are very innovative when it comes to building either the fraud solutions as well as generating new frauds for it. So it's an iterative cycle that you keep working on it.
I get it, because I'll tell you, wall hack and aimbot, two of the most irritating sort of things that were there in any kind of battle royale. And I can tell you when I knew that there were 4 or 5, and you can recognize those gamers from their names, and whenever they were, you will drop out from the lobby, correct? And it was not that I was dropping out. I could see 15-20 players from that lobby dropping out the moment they realized that one team is using wall hacks or aimbots. But coming back to you, not from a safety perspective, but I know you love simulation games. I've played simulator games that you're working on, or at least know about them. So while we have talked about these interactive games, etc., on simulation games specifically, correct, or world building games, how do you think AI can play a role? Because this is slightly different. I won't say very different, but it's a slightly different genre, correct? And the thought process that goes in world building games or simulation games or tycoon games, if you talk about it, is very different. The human psyche involved in those gameplays is very different. So do you think there's a different way of looking how AI can assist you in that?
Definitely. In fact, I will break this into two parts. One part slightly touches upon what Jiku was talking about in terms of analytics. So a very core part of building any game, not just simulation, is building for the right audience and being able to cater to what the audience wants to do, right? And this becomes particularly challenging in a simulation game. So something as simple as figuring out what your target audience looks like, what their preferences are, and what is it that they're playing your game for, right? If the game that we're building right now is a huge world builder where you can build, it's a physics sandbox where you can build anything that you imagine physically possible, right? Now, how do we prioritize which aspect of this world should be built first? So one way is to look at player data and player behavior, but we are very early stage for that, right? We don't have those many players from where we can take meaningful trends. So now what we're doing is we're looking at all the adjacent games that we can think of, and we're looking at how players have been playing those, how they've talked about those games, what are the voices in different communities, different reviews, customer reviews of those games, picking up millions and millions of data points from there and generating insight from there, right? This is educating us in how to approach, how to build a certain aspect of our game and what to prioritize. The second aspect of it is that, we are building, in a way, a set of tools that people can use to interact with the physics sandbox and build interesting systems. Now, a lot of this system building is going to be complex, even for players, right? That's why we're bringing in AI to sort of detect what the player is trying to do and then facilitate them in achieving that. Imagine Office 97 and the paperclip that will come up and say that, hey, are you trying to do this, right? We're doing something similar. In our game, if you start building a set of trees, the game will start asking, the system will start asking itself, is the player trying to make a forest? And it'll start prioritizing things that can help them build a forest in the tool set that they're using. And if the player continues to move forward in that direction, we are continuing to facilitate that and ensure that the forest that they want to build is the most lively forest that they could have built in that environment.
Well, I think this is a very interesting sort of take on how predictive sort of behavior can sort of be baked into at least world building or simulation games. There's a question that I would love to come to Jiku, but we'll talk about a few other things. Someone talked about physics, correct? Like the physics within the games and all. And I always wondered and read about how difficult it is for reflections, correct? And, how the ray mechanics, how it works. And you never want to put two mirrors in front of each other in any game. And correct? I still remember how Max Payne dealt with it and the other games that dealt with it. And when I was playing Asphalt, etc., also the windows, etc., how they reflected the world around. So those are always interesting. So we'll come to that also. But before that, what I wanted to ask is that what I'm hearing a lot is that all these use cases are going to reduce the time taken to build these games, the efforts required, the cost that it has, and effectively a lot of human hours will be reduced, correct? Now, I know all of you are in leadership positions in your organizations. You will be hiring a lot of people to work with you, correct, to help you build that, correct? Because a lot of our audience are students, correct? They are into creative industry. Some of them might be also from the tech background, and they might at some time explore having a career in, either in game design or tech side or creatives within the game, correct? And this is something that we discussed. Do you think that AI will make life so easy, or will it sort of bring down the cost and human hours so low that there will be trouble for a lot of people to build these careers? There won't be enough jobs. And this is a classic, this is not just for gaming and all, this is AI versus job market discussion. But still, from your view, do you think this is a real danger, or do you think that this is one of those things that it can be managed and students who are here can do certain things that can prepare them to sort of face this risk if there is this risk. Maybe Gautam, if you want to start.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a very valid question in these times, and I think Kinshuk already sort of touched upon it. It's sort of like your pre-PC and post-PC kind of situation where now it's AI, and you have to accept the fact that it's there and it's helping a lot of people, helping a lot of companies. There will definitely be jobs that will be taken over by AI, but that doesn't mean that it's not possible to get jobs, right? I think it's all about adapting to the current situation and to learn the craft of making games, be it designer, art, programmer, whatever it is. Just use the AI, like learn to how to work with AI, right? Like if you're a programmer, then your life is easier. So you also can bring in your work and make the products faster, but also in the way that the requirements are there. AI will not just make a game. You can't just tell an AI, I want a simulation game like this and give me the game. It's not going to come out. So I don't think all the roles are like gone, but you just have to adapt is what I feel.
Jigo, you have a different view?
So let's take a scenario. Let's say I'm the founder of a studio and I really want my art team to improve themselves. And let's say they were creating one character, like from the concept to the final, let's say they made it in 10 hours. Extremely talented guy, okay? Only an extremely talented guy can like fully finish it in 10 hours. Now, let's say he is an extremely talented guy. And AI came into the picture. I've asked him to use the AI. And let's say he came back to me telling me that, Jiku, yeah, I mean, two things can happen. He can be afraid of his job, and then he could come and say, Jiku, that doesn't work. Or he can be truthful, to what he really is, and he could come and tell me that, Jiku, it just took me 1 hour to create this, right? Now, a lot of people may actually think like, oh my God, my job is gone, right? But on the other hand, I would be thinking like, damn, that's impressive for sure. Now with the same time that you had actually taken to create that character, which is 10 hours, give me 10 new characters, right? Your job is still not gone. You are still the same guy working the same amount of hours, but giving 10x more productivity. So what's going to happen over here is the game is going to scale up, right? We used to talk about GTA, having its bigger map, 2x, 3x, 10x. Now we can have like infinite x with every single NPC being different, right? We want NPC AI, AI NPC interactions, and we wanted someone to remember that NPC when he see him again. And if we want to really do that, he should be distinctive from the second NPC, right? And we need content, and you will still be creating the same content, right? So there's no job that is gone over here. You are only 2x, 3x, 10x, or maybe 100x multiplying your skills, right? So AI is basically an enabler. You are the refiner. We still need you people. If you guys don't embrace AI into your workflow as to how you're creating stuff, then life would be different for you, right? I mean that's the thing with anything in the industry, right? You can look at the Industrial Revolution. You can even look at your calculators, right? Now it's in the phone, right? So if you're not embracing the new technology, then yes, probably. But if you are embracing it, then don't worry anything. That's my view.
I'd like to touch upon what Jiku said. I was just going to say a lot of that in a slightly different manner. If you look at the history of humanity, right when we were cave people, since then, the entire effort of humanity has been focused on reducing manual effort, because what makes us different from any other animal out there so far that we know of is our intellectual capability, right? The power to imagine and the power to invent. And that's how we first got machines. Mechanical devices came into place. I'm sure a lot of people would have lost their jobs at that point, but then a lot of people also got upskilled, right? And then something that would have taken them days or weeks could have been done in hours. Similarly, then came Industrial Revolution, you had transportation, telecommunication. Information could now be spread within hours and minutes instead of days. And that has always pushed the humanity, the human race forward. Same thing happened with the PC revolution, which I talked about in the early 90s. It's happening with AI now. Give it a few years, and there will be something else that would come along the way, and we'll be having this conversation all over again. So I think the right perspective to look at it, like I would rephrase the question, and I would say instead of the hours being reduced, it's the hours being freed. Right now, in that same man day, I can do 10 more things than I could do earlier. Right? While we are building Second Quest, for us, um, like I am running the business, I am making pitches, I am raising money. I'm also building tools for the team on the side. I'm also creating concept art for the game. I'm also writing down the base specs of how some of the features would be like. I'm also doing the player research of what is it that we are aiming for. So all of that is possible because I have a tool set available with me that frees up my hours, gives me the ammunition to be fighting at all these challenges.
That's an interesting take. I think hours freed, not hours sort of reduced. Also, and you're spending time talking to people here and giving to your 2 cents. Tarun, coming to you, I get everyone what they're saying. As an engineer, and I will say and coders specifically, correct? We know how copilots are working. We know everyone is running. GitHub is doing it. Microsoft is doing it. Everyone is trying to make coders' life easy. I know you have a large enough team. Have you seen, I don't know how much integration of AI in terms of coding you have done. Do you see any structural changes in the number of people generally, or do you think that it's more art freed and you guys are able to increase your productivity while keeping track the number of jobs that you have already, or keeping them constant at least?
So one of the key principles when you design a system or even a machine is you want to cut out the repetitive task. Humans hate repetitive tasks, right? We created a lot of machines around us which will cut down our repetition. Same thing happens when you are building tools, when you are building games, when you are building any kind of a software. You want to cut down the repetitive tasks. That's where AI comes in. It reduces all that manual hours. For example, one of the key principles when you are building a software is writing tests for it, something that developers extremely hate, right? They have to do it because it helps, right? It clearly helps because there are always things that you will miss out. So when you utilize these tools, one thing that clearly it does is makes you more productive, right? The number of hours that you're spending on a problem gets reduced because there is a assistant sitting next to you, which has the vast knowledge that a human can alone grasp. Then the other thing is with these new tools, Copilot, and then there are the AI agents, there are tools which are basically via just the prompt, it will start writing code for you. You just have to, look into it, whether the code has written in a proper manner, and you can then simply let it go. The beauty of all of this is it makes you more creative. It makes you think from 5 different perspectives. Earlier, which was just one, because the time it takes to, to do the research, to get to the place where, whether this kind of a system will work for me or not. That reduces significantly. You are still spending the same amount of hours, but you have gone to 5 different approaches. You have become more creative in your work, which basically in terms makes you more productive as an individual contributor as well as a company. And as humans, we always want to be creative, right? We crave for the creativity. The games are all designed in that. So I don't see any problems as such with that. And it always helps people to, go back to their houses, focus on their work-life balance, spend times, be more creative, read a book or stuff like that. So for us, it has been a boon and it is continuing working that. And we don't see any kind of, change in the requirements because now we can do more creative work. Something that required us to do 6 months, we can do it in 2 months, 3 months, that kind of work.
Interesting.
Just wanted to add to what Tarun said. Just a small example. I'm not a developer, never programmed in my life. And very early on in my career, I learned about something called peer programming. And I was like, why are 2 people wasting their time on the same problem? Never made any sense to me. And all developers would swear by it, that it's essential. And a few weeks ago, I was working on an internal tool for the team, written by AI. And I was just chatting with the AI, just having a conversation. The AI will respond that, okay, we can approach it this way. And then I will talk about, but what if this happens? Or, this scenario. And we were having a conversation like that. Like at times it doesn't feel like you're talking to a computer, right? So had that entire chain of conversations, ended up with the product, and then it suddenly hit me that this is what peer programming is, right? People are brainstorming, finding solutions, writing better systems. And then I was talking to my CTO and I was like, you know what? Now I understand it.
That's an interesting take. So I take more free hours to do the same job quickly and have time for doing more jobs.
I think Tarun also voted for free.
More free hours for imagination and approaching the same problem from different angles, so that you can have the best way and have that end of efficiency sort of achieved much quicker. So that's an interesting take on how jobs. Obviously, there will be a structural change, and there will be sort of a structural change to the job market. But it's better if the new sort of students and people who want to have a career in this industry or in any other industry realize how they want to leverage AI in their workflow right from now, so that when they go to a Tarun or a Jiku or a Kinshuk or Gautam, they can say, see boss, you have told me about your free hours, I can have those free hours, so hire me. So I think that's the crux of it. Now I want to move on to something else. This is the last sort of a part of the conversation, correct? I am a public policy guy who works in tech. And this is something I work at the central government level and otherwise also with different think tanks. And this is about ethics and safety of AI, correct? I was not going to bring it in, but the panelists encouraged me that this is a conversation we should have. So this is a two-part question. One part is something which will put you in spot. The other is something that you'll love to put others in spot. So that I'll very quickly, for people, I know some of you already know about it, but I'll give you an idea, correct? What effectively is an AI? AI is basically something that recognizes pattern, correct? And it predicts the next bit of token or let's say character, correct? So it picks up a prompt. It has been trained on a large set of data where its neural network has figured out how to sort of recognize patterns, and then it predicts the next bit. So before a model is made, fine-tuned, etc., it is trained in a lot of sort of data which is annotated, etc., structured. Can I keep that in background for the question that I'm going to ask? Now, these AI models, so first bit, which is going to put them in spot, is that when we talk about, let's figure out how to increase retention rate, correct? This is a fancy word of making sure that your eyeballs stick to that screen longer. Correct? And there's an ethical concern with it. The ethical concern is that while game designers are building that game, they want you to spend as much time on that platform, which is great for business, but at times there is concern as to by hacking or cracking human psychology, you are making people addicted to a particular gameplay, correct? You are sort of figuring a technical way to look behind what the person doesn't know and are forcing them to sort of play a lot more. What we call as doom scroll is what shorts and reels have figured it out. In gameplay, this is something similar. And now AI can sort of help game designers and developers to figure out how to increase those eyeball hours on their screens in that gameplay, correct? Do you believe there is an ethical concern here, correct? And do you think, and how do you think that this ethical concern sort of can be taken place? Because definitely there is a criticism out there, but I am very sure that you guys are also mindful because you told me that this is something that you are concerned with. A, how do you see this ethical concern? And B, do you think there is a solution? Is it going to come organically from within the developers, or do you think the government and the policymakers will do something about it and then there will be a solution? What are your views? Jiku, because we had this chat, so maybe you can start.
Yeah, both can happen. Just going back probably 5-6 years, I think it was Clash of Clans when I was playing it. They actually told me that you've been playing it for a very long time, consider taking a break. Okay. I don't know if they're still doing it because it's been a while since I played it and their revenues have dropped. So I don't know.
That's why it dropped.
Okay. So most of the GameLoft games do also show this in their loading screen as a tip. Like if you have been playing this for a while, consider taking a break, right? Top studios definitely don't want players to, spend their entire time playing their games because they have enough. Right? But when it comes to rising studios, there's definitely a concern, right? We have to draw a line where it really, really matters, because ultimately we want AI to be a helping hand. We don't want it to be like, someone who manipulates you or even wastes your entire life, because life is not in front of the screen. Life is outside of the screen. And we really want you people to explore the world, which is much beautiful than your screen, right? So I certainly believe there has to be a line that has to be drawn either by the developer. I think it should start from the developer, every single studio. Well, if you don't do it, then the government will definitely do it, right?
Tarun, any view from your side?
Well, this is not something that I've deeply thought about, but I would give my 2 cents to it. Well, definitely there would be ethical concern here because you do not want people to be hooked to a small thing, right? But at the same time, this is what most of the product they are. The social media is focused on getting you there onto their platform and keep you staying there. A game developer will also probably want that. So this is something as a either individual developer or as a company that you have to be very mindful of, because while you are focusing on the short term, getting that short term retention where the player is sitting for hours for you, but in a long term it is always impact negatively for organizations. So this is something that the companies also look into it, where you always build certain mechanisms towards the responsible gaming, where if you're playing for a long amount of hours, it will ask you to stop, take a break, maybe cool down. We have built, so for example, in our company, we have built these kind of constructs where they let you cool down, they literally let you cool off for a day, for a two, just take a break, go outside, do something else, and then you come back. At the same time, governments have building these policies around the same way, for certain. I think I read somewhere that Japan is doing something on the PlayStation where, they won't let you play after a certain amount of hours. So there is a flip side for on the both side, governments helping creating these rules, creating these guidelines for the companies, as well as companies also realize that in long terms it is clearly a negative impactful thing for their long businesses.
Gautam, your
I think it's a generic concern, like these guys are saying, right? Like it's addiction of video games that is already something that is there. I think that's definitely a concern for companies and people who are making games, that you don't want to affect people in a negative way. I'm not really sure of how AI is impacting that. I mean, it can be situations where it's making it easier for someone to find a way to get someone addicted, but I think the generic concerns are always there, and people are working towards that.
So, in case if you guys also figuring out or thinking on how AI is gonna do this, as a game designer, I could just give you an example. See, what do we actually want you guys to do in the game? Like, engage more, right? Play more, increase your session length, right? So we have data, and let's say the data says on an average, a player who's a daily active user in my game spends, let's say, just for the sake of an example, 20 minutes per session, okay? And there are 4 sessions every day, which means like a player would be spending 80 minutes in total every single day. I know that data. Like, I'm the designer, I know that data. Imagine AI, which is inbuilt in the game, also knowing about the same data. He has a pattern. I mean, AI has a pattern. How many of you here say please and thank you to AI? Anyways, just continuing because I said he. So, AI also knows that pattern, and AI can predict when, almost an approximate time when you're gonna end your session. And let's say, just before you were going to end your session, the AI gives you a reward. AI is basically the game, gives you a reward that, imagine an infinite booster, which would be applicable in the game for the next 10 minutes only. There is a fear of missing out that you are immediately having. You're like, wait, I'm getting a booster which I can, using it, I can cruise through the entire game probably for the next 10 more minutes. And I'm like, it's just 10 more minutes, right? What's to lose? And maybe at the end of the 10th minute, it's giving you a juicy offer, like an IAP offer. Like, see, I know AI, okay, knows every single thing about you. Like, if it's a simulation game, let's say Meta AI has its own SDK that I've integrated to my game. What is Meta? Meta is Facebook, WhatsApp, Insta. He knows, they know my likes, dislikes, and everything. I've integrated that to, my game. All of a sudden, at the end, let's say I'm a dragon lover, okay, in real life. The game knows that. At the end of the 10th minute or something, what does AI can do? AI can create assets, right? Just like that, Let's say I'm using a gun in my free-to-play game. It just gives me a new gun with a dragon texture on it. dragon, fire-breathing gun. I'm like, would you buy it or no? Like, what the fuck? I'm like, yeah, yes, I will do it, right? Because that's something that I really like doing, right? So this is some ways that AI can actually, manipulate you, where we should actually, draw a line to.
Correct. Kinshuk, you want
Yeah. So Gautam touched upon this a bit. Addiction of games is a hotly contested topic. It's a chicken and egg problem for me because I think any well-designed game would exhibit natures of being addictive. The one more turn phenomena is a very common phenomenon, right? So there has to be a very clear line that we need to draw in terms of how we use AI. It has to be self-regulated by developers. I don't think any policymaker can make a perfect policy, which means that if we are not self-regulating ourselves, it will eventually create more issues to figure out. So, for example, what Jiku just described is a behavior that we should regulate, right? Which was also the whole point of the whole EA gacha, FIFA gacha lawsuit and all. So, yeah, so those kinds of behavior is something that we really have to be very mindful of. And I believe self-regulation is the most important way to do this.
Great. I totally agree with Kinshuk generally also that I do believe, yes, there is, as everyone pointed out, there is definitely a risk. The risk is not that only AI is making it so, that the games can be more immersive or addictive, if you want to use that. And mind you, the word addiction has a technical and a medical connotation. So what we are saying is not necessarily clinically what people might mean by addiction, but I'm using as general parlance. So while this risk was always there, it's in social media, it's in OTT, it's in gaming, it's in food, it's in processed sugar, correct? It's everywhere. I do think that industry, generally any sector that is prone to it, needs to have an organic understanding of how it needs to be, because the sustainability of that industry depends on it. And I definitely agree with Kinshuk that maybe the industry and the companies and the developers themselves are the right people to do it, maybe collectively, so if not individually, because again, policymakers, etc., it's better they don't come in, because at times the world changes much faster than the policymakers can understand it. So totally agree. We are running out of time. So the last question, and what I'll do is, and again, it's on ethics, and this, I think this is something that the guys who are making these AI models, we'll try to put them in spot. So there's a huge conversation going on. And remember, I told you about how AI models work, correct? They need a huge amount of data, structured data, annotated data, to train their models and fine tune and figure out the weights of the nodes of the neural network. This data is usually not necessarily licensed. Some of it could be, some of it is not. You have to understand all of this data, and especially if it is, let's say, images or text or any kind of information, most of it is either created or sort of collected or collated by some other human being. And that human being has some sort of a copyright over it or some intellectual property right over that data, correct? Now these models, if these data sets are scraped and then these models are trained, there is an ethical concern that people are saying that these same AI models will then replace the need of the guys who were initially designing or creating that data, that image, that model, or that, let's say, that drawing or that picture or that 3D model. Correct. So let's say a diffusion sort of engine or etc. or a Sora etc. is trained on some human's intellectual property, and then they are sort of using that to give an output and generate that new intellectual property. From that perspective, there is a massive sort of a debate going on about whether this is fair, whether this is not fair. Correct. From the ethics of it. Correct. What are your views? Correct. And how should we view it generally from a very nascent yet emerging industry or sector rather of tech that is developing AI models. So and mind you, I'll also like you to put it that, so countries like India, for example, correct, where we already are sort of short on resources when we talk about making our model, if we ever make our own foundational models, correct? Do you think that if we restrict these kind of web scraping for this intellectual property, will that slow down development models for at least the global sort of south? From that context, what do you say? Do you have a view on this?
So I'll add to the question a bit as well. Another aspect that becomes very important is, like you talked about licensing. A lot of this data is like the treatment is similar to stealing that content, right? So that's also the perspective that we have to worry about. Um, it's not licensed data that the model is being trained upon. You're basically stealing someone's hard work. You're not compensating them, and you're not taking consent. So there are two parts of the question. One is, how do we tackle all of this? And the second is that if we tackle all of this, does that reduce the speed of our technical innovation, our technical progress in the geopolitical scenario? There is no simple answer for this. Otherwise, people would have solved this problem. My opinion is that we need to build in checks and balances. We need to segregate the public data and the, for want of a better word, the stolen data. And I don't understand the subject enough, so I can't offer solutions. But I think that's a critical distinction to make. Like as a creator myself, I am very cognizant of the fact that the models that I'm using might have stolen data as source for their training, which is why I ensure that I am not creating something that will end up being part of my product. It's all brainstorming and thought process and thought exercises and stuff like that. But on the other side, how can that affect our technological progress? I think smart systems, smart checks and balances will not discourage your speed of innovation. But it's a very simple thing to say and a very complex thing to figure out.
It's a very controversial thing that you have asked. I'm trying to figure out a way to explain this without becoming big. So, to start with privacy, right? What is privacy? When a company advocates for privacy, saying that your data is safe with us, that only means I'm not going to sell your data, but I'm going to use your data for my business perspectives, right? So, my data is still shared. In that aspect, no one is safe from sharing their data to anyone, right? In a Gameloft perspective, we are very, very strict about what we are sharing with any third-party tool, and we always are tracking and monitoring what each of our employees are actually sharing, because of which we have all these in-house tools. Yeah, I cannot talk about anything further, but yeah, we are really, really careful of what is getting shared, because it is sensitive. Even if you're trying to log in into one particular LLM using the Gameloft ID, you have to get an approval from their IT admin, from the headquarters, right? It's that serious. So yes, I completely agree with that. And as studios or developers, we have to be really, really careful on what we are sharing. As individuals, on the other hand, no matter what you do, it'll be shared. But yeah, be careful on that lines as well.
I think the point about what data it's using, all these models, it's definitely a concern. I think our stand also is that whatever information it's using, whatever images, sounds, or design, or whatever it's using, the credit needs to be there. The companies that are building these tools need to ensure that what the input data that they're taking is credible, is credited also to whoever data that was, and proper permissions have been taken. I think it's very important for these bigger companies to make sure that it's done properly. I think even if you do a Google image search, you see which are copyrighted images, which are open for use. So I think it's on the companies who are building these AI models to make sure that they don't use the data that they're not supposed to use. And that's my opinion. And if they do, they have to get consent. And that already exists in images before AI, right? Like if someone's using all the copyright and everything, I think you know that much better. But I think it's important as public, as companies also, to hold AI companies accountable and make sure that they are clear in their terms.
On this piece, right, so there is this very simple phrase, right, reinventing the wheel. You want to reuse the knowledge that as a humans we have gathered. So on that perspective, if you want to train an AI, you need data, and you use these kind of tools. You scrap the internet, you read books, you do all of that. But at the same time, right, the line has been very clear. There are copyright laws, there are patent laws, which basically tells you that you have to take a permission. If you are monetizing, you have to share the profits. So I don't think there is actually a question around it, because clearly it's not ethical, clearly it's not legal. However, I also see the point where, why it was required. But with the new models that are coming in, like for example, the DeepSeek R3 model that came, right, the reinforcement learning, I'm assuming that with slowly, we don't have to do these kind of things. The companies which are building these tools, they have figuring out a new model, because at the same time, the amount of data that we are generating day on day or year by year, at the same time, the training that has been happening, right, the first ChatGPT model when it came, I think it was trained on 2020 model. The next one came, which was just few months back, and today we have gotten to a place where your LLM can do an internet search, right? So they are also running out of data now. Now they are also running out of data to steal, or take in the right manner. So the new tools, the new techniques are coming in, which doesn't require you to, take someone's creative data, the work that they have done. So I'm hoping that with time, that will not be a problem. But yeah, the line has been very clear on this.
Yeah, I think we've already overshot our time a bit because it started a little late. But I'll say thank you, everyone. It was a very interesting conversation. We covered how AI is being used in different sort of life cycle of game development, from generating content, generating characters, generating behaviors of NPCs, figuring out analytics into user behavior, increasing retention, sort of improving how to systems to avoid frauds, etc., increasing safety. We've talked about ethical concerns around job loss or how to leverage, have more freedas there. We have talked about generally how addictive gameplay could be made using AI. We have talked about, what is the right way of training AI models, if there is one, correct? And these are all complex questions and may not be able to be answered just on this panel. But we have covered a large gamut of those questions, and I think this is one of the most interactive sort of sessions where there were difference of opinions, but there were justification as to why there are difference of opinions. So thank you everyone for taking out the time, and thank you to the audience for sitting so engaged with the conversation just after the lunch. So thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for listening.
Come on, ladies and gentlemen, give a big round of applause for our esteemed panelists for an extremely insightful discussion on AI's role in gaming industry. Thank you so much, panelists, for your invaluable insights, which you shared with all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly please be seated. We're quickly now going to move on with our next session, which you should definitely not miss on. Thank you once again, esteemed panelists, for doing the honors and being right here.